Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I want to welcome the esteemed panelists to the discussion today. I'm Arif Ansar. I'm the Chief Analyst for Polytech Strategic Advisory Firm, discerning political, security, and economic affairs from the vantage point of South Asia and Middle East. We've been thinking about starting a Washington roundtable discussion for a while now, and the events related to the India-Pakistan tensions have galvanized us to, do that quickly. And today marks the first session that we are doing under the auspices of Pakistan American Policy Forum. I was just talking to Khalisa about that. A lot is going on, obviously, but let me first start with the introductions and then move into the actual discussion. Dr. Khalid Al-Maina Saab, as you all know, as we know, was the chief editor for Arab News, formerly, and Saudi Gazette. He went to school in Pakistan and knows intimately the Pakistani politics and the leadership over there, and seems to be a regular visitor to India as well. So he knows that India and the leadership there as well. And interestingly, obviously, the Middle East. So that part of it, his home ground, and has been involved in major events related to the Saudi and the Middle East. Moving on to Dr. Hassan Abbas, as we were talking earlier, he's the professor of international security studies and chair of the Department of Analytical Studies at the U.S. National Defense University. His recent book was The Return of Taliban Afghanistan After Americans Left. Dr. Huda is a Michael E. Paul Distinguished Visiting Professor of International Affairs at the United States Naval Academy. He was previously a senior policy advisor for U.S. Department of State Office for Religion and Global Affairs. His areas of focus were civil society organization, education, multilateral affairs, mitigating the violent extremism. And his very recent book, and a very timely one, is Re-envisioning Peace Building and Conflict Resolution in Islam. It is being well received, so it will be interesting to hear his perspective as well. Having said that, a lot is going on, as we know, on the Pakistan-India side. The tensions are building. One of the positive news came yesterday that there was a ceasefire that President Trump announced, and with the help of U.S. mediation. Things on the ground look more dynamic, and I'm not sure if it's going to hold or not. So let's start the discussion, first of all, to examine how we got here. I mean, this has been a continuous back and forth every 4 or 5 years. We have a major event or a terrorist event, and then we go into a similar kind of back and forth, resulting in a confrontation between two nuclear powers. And surely Pulwama was 2019, and now we have another attack in Kashmir, and the same trajectory, but reaching the point of confrontation. So let's start first of all with the discussion on, will the ceasefire hold? And I'll ask Dr. Hassan first to start with the discussion.
Thank you very much, Arif. Honored to be here with very distinguished panelists, with my colleague Kamar Huda and other guest, Mr. Khalid Almina, who may remember me from many years ago when he was running very renowned Saudi Arab news channel. That was among the first ones, and we used to read it and comment on it. So great to be with you. I think this ceasefire will hold. And the reasons are that both countries, India and Pakistan, realize that for both of them, continuation of the hostilities could have become very, very expensive and very, very dangerous. And they both did, from their point of view, what they wanted to do on both sides. They can claim victory to some extent. India can claim that they were able to target some of these, from their point of view, militant centers, which in fact were not militant centers, but these were some seminaries associated with some previously banned terrorist organizations, which were known for their activities inside the Indian-controlled Kashmir. So India can claim they hit there. They can claim they hit also one of Noor Khan base, a very important Pakistani air base. And Pakistan can argue that they responded so effectively. They shot down 3 or 5 maybe Indian fighter aircrafts, including their most advanced one. And they were able to stop the Indians, go inside India. And also Pakistan hit many of the sites, some of the air bases inside India. So Pakistan can claim victory. And both of them had reached out, to the best of my knowledge, and also now New York Times say this, and also CNN stories corroborate this or provide further substantiate this point, that both countries had reached out to United States for ceasefire. So both have announced ceasefire. Of course, but given the command and control systems, it takes about 24 hours to 48 hours for the decision to go down the chain, and especially somebody who is on the line of control in Pakistan, who has lost his people, may think, okay, this is my final moments. I'll have one more shot on the other side. Same on the Indian side. They can think they can further send one more drone to get some more intel and surveillance from the Pakistan side. But I think within 24 to 48 hours, these things will stop. I'm very confident this ceasefire will hold. The bigger question is whether this will lead to a peace process that can ensure that this ceasefire will stay for a long term.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Dr. Kamar,
Yes,
would you like to add?
thank you, and thank you for inviting me with such wonderful, esteemed colleagues. I will pick up from there, which is, will the ceasefire remain and stick? And even though a lot of the surrounding conversation, how this ceasefire came about, is still up in the air for conversation, because from the even though I'm in Washington D.C. and so are some of my other colleagues, this was news for all of us because of the initial reaction of the White House, which is this is a shame, quote unquote. They should work it out. And then there was a sort of a feeling of not just indifference, but there's something will be resolved amongst the two countries. So there wasn't a very strong expression of intervention, prevention, and de-escalation from DC. And so this was a little strange that there was a tweet that said this was a ceasefire. And then whereas on the, I think, Delhi side, they were really, the response was very strong, and meaning from not just government, but NGOs that saying this is a surprise to them. And the US is in no position to impose a ceasefire while we're still in combat. And it's an unfolding situation. So a ceasefire, first of all, what is a ceasefire and how exactly can it be called a ceasefire? A ceasefire is just not just a cessation of armed activities. It's not just planes and engaging with the other side. A ceasefire is of course, is a verbal one. It's also written, but it's also usually done diplomatic work, heavy diplomatic work. And it seems that both sides, India and Pakistan, while saying it's a ceasefire, we don't know the evidence of the diplomatic work there, other than some tweets and maybe a few phone calls and some other. So whether this is a true and honest to God ceasefire, I think that's the one question. Two, whatever this is, will it stick, is the other question. And I think one of the things is that I think Pakistan and India may be interested in making sure this cessation endures. However, at this time, I don't know if both parties are actually committed to a ceasefire in terms of the things that are required, because ceasefires then that just speaks about issues in particular topics that they want to discuss, what caused them to get here. And one of the things, of course, is the suspension of the water from the Indian side, of course, the outstanding Kashmiri issue, outstanding terrorism issues, both sponsored by both sides, non-state actors on both sides, regional instability. All of these outstanding issues need to be addressed diplomatically, and we don't know if there is an agreement on any of all of these issues. This morning's tweet is that Kashmir was included in President Trump's tweet that he wants to mediate Kashmir issue. And again, while on Pakistan, they may have found this very supportive and exciting. And again, the Indian media and some of the responses have been extremely explosive. So what is the DC approach to a ceasefire currently is still unclear for some analysts, but we hope that is another thing we should also talk about is that there may be multiple ceasefire actors who want to. So China may want a role. Some of the Gulf states may want a role. There are other international organizations that maybe want a role. The EU has been saying that they want a role to mediate a ceasefire. So there are multiple international and regional actors trying to initiate some sort of ceasefire or plan if the American initiative does not work.
Thank you, Kamar, for a very elaborate response and the intricacies of some of the aspects that are involved. Just before we started the discussion, I was talking to Khalid Saab, and he mentioned that, how much particularly this time, how much of the hate mongering is happening
Yes.
on the ground. And as you were just mentioning, that there is obviously the official version, but when you watch the social media and though some of those people, it seems like India has been caught on the back foot politically because of the hype that was created earlier. There is no room now because since the events have changed so quickly, moving from going all out to all of a sudden talk of ceasefire. I would like to get Khalid Saab's viewpoint on that from that perspective, that which you were mentioning, that the hate side of it.
Yes, thank you for being with these distinguished gentlemen. One thing I would like to add, while the focus is on America as a peacemaker or at least cessation of hostility, Dr. Khamar also mentioned the Gulf states and all, and Saudi Arabia did send a special envoy, Mr. Adil Jubair, who is very well versed in diplomatic talks, to go to both India and Pakistan. And the Gulf states themselves want to avoid any major conflict because they are very near. Second, because of the large number of the people from the subcontinent there that might cause also domestic problems, by fighting and all, especially where there is like large number of Indians. So that's one. What I noticed also regarding the media side, I noticed that for the first time, this reminded me of the phony war of 1939-1940 during the Second World War, when Britain declared war, but there were no wars, no major conflict for about a year, hitting in Germany. So this was exactly a media war. The fake news that was coming from the mainstream media, and the hate by some of the self-appointed guardians of India and the BJP and other people coming in. So this caused, on the other side, I made a very quick survey of Indians and Pakistanis, and this was as latest as the day before. Honest to God, whether it was Hindus or Muslims or Christians or Sikhs and all, people don't want war. In a nation where 40 to 50 million people in India have no access to toilets, on the other side where people fight at a well over water and accuse each other of blasphemy and somebody is put to death, I think these nations need to focus on development. So as Dr. Kamar said, we don't know what is going to happen, but I truly believe that there should be a focus on a long-range plan to see to it that apart from Kashmir, there are other issues that need to be resolved. Otherwise, it's going to go on. But very sad state of the Indian media, which has really caused havoc. On the Pakistan side, I noticed, and in this flurry of activities, the tone was less hostile. In fact, people were talking about having peace, not from a standpoint of weakness, no, but from a standpoint of that development is the key issue that faces the people. Political instability is all over the subcontinent. So I think the focus, rather than having a bravado and trying to do something that will make one superior to the other, this does not come in the mind. Now, of course, the hatred still continues. This morning I was going through, and some people have even attacked the foreign secretary of the foreign ministry of India, asking him to resign. Some said he's a traitor because they accepted the ceasefire. On the Pakistan side, people are, distributing sweets in Multan and Bahawalpur and Karachi and elsewhere. So there is bifurcation of the elements of the political and social thoughts in both countries.
Thank you, Khalid Saab. We were going to come back later to the Saudi role, as you just mentioned. Saudi Arabia has emerged as one of the other, centers where most of these peace talks seems to be taking place. The Ukraine-Russia one being the recent one. And like Qatar, Saudi Arabia seems to be, leading the role in that instance. And if I'm not wrong, the last person out of Pakistan before the Pakistan retaliated was the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, trying to mitigate, trying to prevent the tensions to escalate further. We know that President Trump is traveling to Saudi Arabia, the very first visit outside of the United States, like the first time, like his first presidency. And what is the significance of that as it relates to the situation of the Middle East, the Gaza crisis, and what's unfolding over there? But we'll come to that later. Let's come back to that situation, the Pakistan-India tensions, and the question of if it's going to stick or not. And I'll come to Dr. Hassan that again, uh, seems like the political nature of this environment in India right now. Again, I can't confirm it, but from the social media, it's almost like they're saying that tonight there was going to be another strike from India. There is no political buffer, seems like, for the political leadership in India to be able to support this ceasefire from the rhetoric where it was. And then all of a sudden, this new tweet from President Trump this morning, welcomed in Pakistan, obviously, because I think it pretty much, drowns the Shimla agreement, because he's saying that I'm ready to. I mean, although he added a caveat, if both countries agrees, but he's ready to go full force. He's saying I'm going to increase trade and investment in these countries. India is backing off altogether. That why is US involved in this? So, what's your take on this in the sense of, do they have the political capital to carry this on, the ceasefire or the talks?
Thank you for this nuanced question. I'm pretty confident this, and what I had mentioned, the ceasefire will hold for the following reasons. First and foremost, India is quite close to the United States, and this has been happening for the last 3 to 4 US administrations because of the economic reasons, currently the US Indo-Pacific strategy, and also from the US angle, looking at India as a major country which can challenge China's hegemony in that region. So India is a very important friend or partner of US for these variety of reasons. Now, as soon as President Trump came into office, we know of leading Indian, the foreign secretary was here, the prime minister was here, then the vice president of United States, J.D. Vance, went to India. So the interactions, and then there was Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State who interacted directly with the Indian leaders. So the US-India interaction and collaboration in trade, in maritime security, in these issues are very strong. So when the Foreign Secretary of India that's why there was this reaction against the Indian Foreign Secretary. When he comes out and makes an official statement, and then Mr. Jaishankar also said, and then today, when the top commanders of the armed forces of India came out for their briefing, they also mentioned it. So India has officially accepted the ceasefire. So that's why I have no doubt that they will not violate it. For Pakistan's point of view, Pakistan feels it has come out successful, and it seems to be the case, which I'm repeating myself, but that's very important, that Pakistan was able to show that their Air Force is superior to the Indian Air Force despite the numbers, and the Chinese aircraft, the way Pakistan used those, we know it for a fact, the stock in the stock market, the Chinese equipment's value has gone up, and there's all that side of things. So Pakistan is unlikely to violate at this time. Also, we need to look at the what we call the escalation ladder. And at this time, when both sides have targeted each other and both sides have tested each other, I don't think, I mean, yes, if it was entirely left to India, they thought, I think, mistakenly, I personally believe this was a strategic miscalculation on the part of India to opt for this. Without any evidence, they struck Pakistan. There was a terrorist attack in India, which must be condemned. It was a deplorable action. I think Pakistan also declared that. And Pakistan asked for very clear independent investigation into who conducted this attack. I mean, later on, if we can talk about that as well, because that is also critical in this whole spectrum. But these are the reasons why I think India, whatever their public opinion is, which they have the fakeness of the narratives and the way the Indian media got berserk. I mean, that's something not which you can see in terms of which gels well with the status that India is trying to project. India is a very important country. It's a very important civilization also. But what the Indian media showed with total disinformation, misinformation, the kind of craziness that was unbecoming of India. That has created a very bad image. So maybe it is that pressure which is giving the impression that India will strike or they will still be at war. But this most likely is only in the misinformation, disinformation sphere. The Indian leadership has made a commitment to United States to the best of my understanding, and I think they'll stick to it.
And that leads to the next question, the information warfare. You mentioned that the media hype, you listen to the media. Obviously, this is a totally different paradigm. Seems like the conflict is happening not only technologically, what we're saying, but also the element of AI and warfare, fake news. You listen to the Indian media, they're building the case that Pakistan is sending in drones, they're launched another strike. Pakistan is saying they have not. They're respecting the ceasefire, and that's the point Dr. Kamar earlier made, that although there was announcement of ceasefire, and as we have seen in many other places where there's conflict, especially recently Gaza, that monitoring the ceasefire, who is violating the ceasefire, it's a very tricky business, right? It's very easy to establish unless there are independent observers, and we are nowhere near there. And obviously, no, I think neither probably would India, probably more so, will accept such a prospect. But then, because of the nature of the fake news, public is watching that. How has the landscape changed, and what would need to happen from the US side if they are interested and serious about, as they have shown, to make sure that it sticks, and what could be the steps that US could take to ensure that it's a slippery slope and we don't end up back to where we started from in the sense of the confrontation. Dr. Kamar, if you want to go first.
Well, this leads to you're asking the most very profound question: is how do we know we don't get back to this moment of another conflict? And for over 2 decades, this has been, the sort of the cycle of skirmishes, limited warfare,
and both sides claiming that we are responding, we are reacting, you did this, and
exactly. And I think there's a couple of things here. One is if the region is ready for a comprehensive peace agreement, right, and what that looks like. Both India and Pakistan is really ready for a comprehensive peace agreement that's not only led regionally but internationally by China, the Gulf states, and EU, and so forth, the US, because this is for many markets, meaning political markets, economic markets, whether it be the Gulf states or the US or EU, to have an India of this enormous, of now probably the 4th largest economy in the world, and it's heavily interrelated, interconnected to many markets, information, pharmaceuticals, everything you can think of, to have it destabilized every few years with these skirmishes over Kashmir, over non-state actors issues, is so disruptive. And whenever there's this disruption, most policymakers think, how reliable is this partner? And Dr. Abbas pointed out the heavily strong connection with the Indo-Pacific strategy, IPS, and because of this heavy investment for the past 10 years on India to contain China with the Quad, heavily investing in the military, heavily investing in military work and weaponry and training and so forth, folks wonder how reliable is such a country. And of course, India's response is that we have strategic autonomy. We do what we can for our country, as well as for our partnerships that they have established. So if India wants to move forward with a long-term peace agreement, it needs to address these outstanding issues from the 20th century. And so I think both Pakistan and India need to really resolve it. The whole thing is, will this last? And I think that's why I say the question within conflict resolution and ceasefires is, was it the ripeness? Was this the proper time for all parties to sit down. And so there's a ripeness issue, there's a preparation issue, there's issues that needs to be, all these issues need to be, as they say, was the table set for dealing with these issues? The table was set or not? And I don't think at the moment, it may have been set just for a few days that, okay, we're heavily now invested, the US is invested, and the parties need to come to this. But there's so many other ways and things that are complexly interrelated to see if this is going to last longer than this week. So post this week, I think the region needs to, and international actors, and I think this is what the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia needs to really will take a lead on addressing these key issues heavily, because they are, one, a reliable partner for both countries, and we also saw their presence in the recent hosting of the US, Russia, and Ukraine in Riyadh. So they have been taking international mediation efforts seriously, and they are viewed as sort of the next leaders in many of these existing conflicts.
Thank you, Dr. Qamar. I'll come to Khalid. This may be the most appropriate time for that question. That, as you had mentioned earlier, Khalid Saab, President Trump is heading to the Saudi Arabia, and he has, as he likes to create media hype, he said that there's going to be a big news coming out. So I would like to hear what that big news is, and I would also like you to cover that aspect of it. It used to be that Saudi Arabia would be, follow the line of Pakistan when it came to the South Asia, but ever since they have established good ties with India as well, and it mainly because of the Indian, trade and their growing influence around the world. And Saudi Arabia had wisely developed a policy to improve their relations with India. Now, it now places it in a unique position that, as we were talking, that the Saudi ambassador has made an effort. What is the role of Saudi Arabia in this context?
Regarding the role which you said that Saudi Arabia leaning to Pakistan, for years, I used to be accosted by Indian diplomats and media people and say that you are looking at India through the Pakistani prism, maybe, maybe not. But right now, there's a great shift in the geopolitical dimensions of Asia. India has emerged as a power, and the Saudis also are, mature enough to recognize that one has to deal with so many people and so many actors, both state and non-state actors. So I think within that context, yes, Saudi Arabia has made reaches, especially in the economic sector, because India has offered a lot of things that the other countries in the region cannot offer. The Saudis also know, by virtue of their position in the Gulf states and in the Muslim world, they can play the role of an honest broker between both these sides. And that's why the last plane, as was said, coming out of Islamabad was a Saudi plane. Having said that, it's very important, and I said this earlier, that there should be peace and stability in the region, because the spillover effect is too much, because we are intertwined with all the Gulf states, in fact, but the Saudis, are the least of them, but still politically, economically, and in many ways, morally, they can go ahead and play a strong and definite role in this presence. Now, coming to Trump, Mr. Trump is coming. Yes, he will be there. What I think should be known, that he does come up with statements like important news and all. And I read in the news about Mr. Trump and the Israeli angle and all. But let it be very clear that the Saudi government, in terms of Gaza, have condemned right and left. Secondly, regarding any relationship with Israel or building up a bridge or something, it will only happen as the policies have been stated over the years, and increasingly now, that there should be a two-state solution with Jerusalem as the capital. That is a very difficult thing to happen from the Arab point of view, because the Israelis are very adamant. So it is like, what comes first, negotiation or coming up with some ideas. It's the horse and the cart situation. So I think Trump may focus on that. And then at the same time, the Saudis have played their mark. For years, the approach to foreign policy was low key, but right now there's an assertion in Saudi Arabia that there is interconnection between the world. So whatever happens here affects the others. For us, both Europe and the United States are equally important. Asia is important. And we want to have a trouble-free region all around us, not only all around us, but all over the world. And this is very important because right now the focus, as I said, on changing drastically the Saudi society, the Saudi economy and all, to an economy that will be totally sustainable, and the target is 2030.
Thank you, Khalisa. But do you see a role, a further role in the sense of what President Trump announced this morning, that they want to get involved in the peace process in the sense of the Kashmir issue, and also that Dr. Qamar Huda was earlier alluding to, that other players may need to be involved. He mentioned China and other regional countries. Do you see that Saudi can play that role, since they have influence on now both sides, with Pakistan and India and with the US? Since President Trump is, the first country he's visiting again is Saudi Arabia. So do you see that this role could, strengthen as in relation to that peace or initiative that President Trump is envisioning?
Yes, I think the Saudis can play a role if they're asked to. They'll play a role, but it takes two to tango. Both India and Pakistan should make an effort to really get on the table and negotiate, and then people who are honest brokers from both sides can come and play a role. It is not because of America's bidding or because Trump has arrived, but it is in the interest of Saudi Arabia, and that there should be peace in the region, because flying from Dhahran in the east coast of Saudi Arabia to Karachi is 2 hours, and from other points of the Gulf and all. We do not want conflagration. We don't want, God forbid, a nuclear issue with, how it is. Any nuclear battle is going to cause a lot of problems around the area. So it's extremely important, and Saudi Arabia can do it. The role of Saudi negotiations has been going on. And may I remind you of something that happened in Pakistan in 1954? And I was researching that Saudi Arabia negotiated with Afghanistan during a conflict called the Fakir of Ipi. And I don't know whether people will remember that when they came and laid claims in the Pakhtun thing, the King Saud sent a special envoy to calm both sides. So our history of negotiations and trying to get people together is very lengthy. And hopefully we can do that. But I think we do it because it stems out of our own ideological feelings of having peace rather than somebody coming. But I think, yes, with Trump coming there with a new angle, but the question also lies now, and the onus is on India, whether they will accept, people from outside. That's one. Second, as both the gentlemen said about the ceasefire, international observers should be there so that people at least will see who's violating whom. Thirdly, as again was mentioned by the two gentlemen, I believe what is happening now, with people who are, screaming and roaring for war in India, this is gutter journalism. I'm really appalled that mainstream India, that people who had some voice and a medium for relaying their thoughts and process have resorted to this. But on the other hand, let me be also very frank, that the people against war among many journalists, many media people, many politicians is also very high. So I think it's the divide in India. And a lot of this hate is coming out of northern India, in the Gujarat area, if I may be bold enough to say that. But by and large, Indians do not want war, neither do the Pakistanis.
Thank you, Khalisa, for an elaborate answer. Coming to Dr. Hassan and Dr. Kamar, they both teach as well, obviously. And I was thinking when I was going to school and studying international relations, and so I remember studying those nuclear doctrines, nuclear utilization theory, MAD, mutually assured destruction. The lessons of the Cold War, that Cold War was that, yeah, you fight proxy wars. You try to undermine your adversaries, maybe regime change. But once you're in a nuclear environment, you don't go to war with the nuclear, adversary, because that's mutually assured destruction. Now, in the context of Pakistan, India, those doctrines seems to be, falling by the wayside. The escalation ladder, like Dr. Hassan, you mentioned that. So we have these, irrespective of who's to blame, there is proxies wars going on, groups being supported by one or the other side. And the reason was that you can't go to fight with each other. You're nuclear powers now. That's why you sit down and talk. That is the reason why nuclear powers, some countries have nuclear weapons. So is this, how do we address this situation now as it relates to Pakistan and India that are throwing missiles at each other? What are they thinking, especially from the Indian side?
Absolutely. No, this is a very complex as well as complicated issue. The way we can kind of try to unravel it, or try to just go step by step backwards also, which is extremely important. So the facts are known widely, so I'll not repeat those, but the countries with 70 years of history, having gone to war at least thrice in a major way. India and the 1971 war, their support for the Bengalis had led to the dismemberment of Pakistan. And at the same time, in parallel, the major issue which divides both countries is about Kashmir, which Pakistan claims, and I think under the United Nations resolution, rightly so, that there was supposed to be a plebiscite or a referendum to ask people of Kashmir which side they are on. And both the countries never fulfilled those requirements, which would have enabled a holding of that plebiscite. And then in 1980s, there's this one dispute of Kashmir, which was then arbitrarily through limited war was divided between Indian-controlled Kashmir and Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, and this remains under the international law. And I speak as in wearing my hat as a student of international law also. That this is a disputed land under customary international law, as well as based on all the previous treaties. The point is also, which we cannot ignore, that Pakistan at one point in 1980s decided during the Afghan jihad years, inverted commas jihad, that Pakistan would start supporting some of these militant groups, all the Lashkars and the Jaishes, which is a fact. They conducted many activities, terrorism, violence inside Indian-controlled Kashmir. India has been, it's not that India has been sitting with its hands on their lap. India has been involved in subversive activities in Pakistan as well. Whether currently Pakistan believes that there was a Jaffa train express crisis about a few weeks ago, that India was involved in that, or that the Washington Post story is in front of our eyes, that India targeted about 12 to 13 militant leaders across Pakistan who had either retired or resigned, or they were on kind of lying low, and India came in with their intelligence, using a base actually in one of the Gulf countries through which people were hired and or recruited, and then they targeted these people. So we know 13 militants killed, which was something quite embarrassing for Pakistan. So there's that history to this, which cannot be, because that's whenever we talk to our students from India or experts or officials from India, that is number one issue on their line, which will have to come up between India and Pakistan. So that in that context, or that background, both countries have been irritating each other, bothering each other. Pakistan is facing multiple challenges in terms of economy, political instability. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is creating havoc in Pakistan's Pashtun majority areas. Also, BLA, Balochistan Liberation Army, is conducting terrorist activity and insurgency in parts of Balochistan. So Pakistan is faced with those severe challenges also, with unstable Afghanistan under the Taliban. In that scenario, India was looking perhaps at this as an opportunity that Pakistan is quite weak. There's a terrorist activity that has taken place. There's no need for any evidence or to have any talks. Just go and make the best use of this opportunity. They didn't realize Pakistan was fully prepared for these kind of situations because they invest heavily in their military. As you have rightly mentioned, nuclear weapons are the last option in this range. The animosity, the hatred between India and Pakistan cannot be taken away, unfortunately, because there's history of war. They each other, they see the other side as a severe challenge to their own identity. They have made into an identity crisis. And then tragically, the Hindu-Muslim, the way to explain it and define it as Hindu-Muslim rivalry, which is a very terrible way, a very unfortunate way to frame it like that. In this context, under these circumstances, it is written on the wall that they will go to war or these skirmishes and conflicts again and again. That's why they need to get back. And nuclear weapons, I am personally very confident that India and Pakistan will not launch nuclear weapons at each other. They may show, they may project, they may start taking out their weapons because that's how they come under the international surveillance and monitoring, and big countries or big players jump in. But any use of nuclear weapon, whether tactical weapon or other weapon, will not will impact both sides. Even if one country is successful in using it, the negative consequences, environmental consequences of that will have impact on their own country. And of course, Pakistan is not North Korea with 3 weapons. They have 150 weapons or 170. Same number with India. India has a second strike capability. Pakistan most likely either has achieved it or is very close to it. So with second strike capability, it means one side will use a weapon, the other side will. Now, very briefly, Pakistan says Pakistan is not signed on to this idea of no first use of nuclear weapons. India has. It's a large country. It has many backup scenarios at play. For Pakistan, they have mentioned this is our credible minimum deterrence. They also claim we will only use it if a significant chunk of our land is taken away, or Pakistan's economic hubs are destroyed, or the integrity and the sovereignty of the country is at stake. But that comes much after these military escalations. So I'm confident that nuclear balance, in fact, creates the environment where both countries will hopefully, like in this case, will never go to a full-fledged war, but will keep on hitting each other, irritating each other, bothering each other, damaging each other. That's why this is time to think of a sustainable peace process where, with the help of third parties, Saudi Arabia can play a very important role. Qatar can play an important role. Oman can play a role. These countries have shown, many of these have shown neutrality. Even there's a lesson. The rapprochement or deal that was helped from China between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think played a very significant role in cooling whatever the kind of challenges both Saudi and Iran were facing. So we have a model there. And each of these countries, Saudi Arabia's relationship with Pakistan is, I think, a very important pillar of Pakistan's strategy and relationships. Saudi Arabia, without Saudi help to Pakistan, and to a lesser extent Qatar and UAE and others, but most importantly Saudi Arabia, I think that leverage that Saudis have on Pakistan, this is time for India to think about it, that Saudi Arabia can be a very credible third party, neutral, which can play a neutral role, other than the global players. But the conversation has to start from very basic things on Kashmir, on cross-border militancy, on use of spying and proxies, and then it will come to a point where the ceasefire will convert into a sustainable peace process. These both countries have common heritage, language, poetry, culture, media, movies, entertainment. Look at the top Pakistani Qawwali singers when they go to India. Look at which Pakistani household is not watching Bollywood movie. Maybe not for the last 3 days, but otherwise that's the daily thing they do. So there's so many commonalities and things that bond them together. I think it will be a matter of one major outside player who will bring them to the table And once they overcome the barrier, the initial barriers, it will be a very quick pathway to peace, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Very
May
encouraging
I
to hear
add
that.
something, Mr. Arif?
Yes, please go ahead.
What I think was said was very correct. The people coming from Saudi Arabia or, all kinds of lobbying for peace. But I think, the elements in India also, those who are baying for war and their malicious intents also should know. I think there's a common history of culture, even religion, even all kinds of festivities that go on together, the trends in India and Pakistan. But having said that, if it's not implemented and if there are state and non-state actors on both sides who would want this to continue, who suffers? Many of the Indians who called said that the people are suffering. Many of the Pakistanis who said that our developmental projects are now put on hold. So I agree with you. As much as we put pressure from outside or we come up with ideas, there should be saner elements in both countries that should say enough is enough.
Thank you, Khalid Saab. And moving towards our Qamar Saab, and I know we're towards the end of this a couple of questions. The aspect of the great power rivalry, and we saw in the clashes, right, that took place, and the involvement of Chinese technology on the Pakistan side, and how that made a difference in the skirmishes that have happened. On the other hand, we see that President Trump, at least what we know of, he like to look at spheres of influence or at things. And how do you think that the events unfolding play out in the sense of the great power rivalry, especially because you mentioned that China could play a role as well?
Yeah, I think there's been an intensive role between the U.S., of course, India, Japan, on containing China, creating alternatives to the Belt Road Initiative that China has successfully rolled out and is connecting, Beijing to Central Asia, of course, Pakistan into, Eastern Western Asia and into Europe. And the response to many of these has been, we need to not only contain the oceans, but also create an alternative. And one of those major alternatives were rolled out a year and a half ago with the Middle East corridor, from Delhi to United Arab Emirates to Saudi upwards. And this would save about nine days of time on ships and millions, if not billions of dollars. And so there's all these counter Chinese initiatives that the Indians are very heavily involved with the Gulf states and the US. And these initiatives are heavily important to see China as a way to limit their ascendancy. Now, if India is constantly bogged down in these border issues, water issues, Kashmir, I think the U.S. has realized that they are not going to play that role that they are heavily investing in. But that's not only that is one issue. The issue is that India is again a South Asian nation that has emerged as one of the most important world powers. But in the South Asia region, in its neighbors, it has many, many problems. Not only with Pakistan, obviously, but has had historical problems with, as we saw, with Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka is heavily involved with the Sri Lankan Civil War. Some of it is still playing out in different ports. Has issues of obviously with this poor planning with Afghanistan, which was a counter-Pakistan policy. So the question is, if they want to play an international role as an alternative and with the U.S. to counter China, how can they lead if they don't have the proper leadership in South Asia? If they're seen as an hegemon by its neighbors, and they're unable to have respectful and responsible relationships with its key neighbors in the South Asia. So these questions are raised for any superpower, any emerging power, but it is if these things can absolutely undermine any real investment in a country that's supposed to be playing a heavy role in the global superpower competition.
All right. Moving to the last question, and that has to do with the domestic politics of Pakistan, particularly. We talked about the political dynamics playing out in India and how that is an obstacle to the ceasefire sticking or maybe to the future talks related to the Kashmir. As we know, Pakistan has been seeing political instability as related to PTI and Imran Khan. If these kinds of serious talks were to start and a roadmap comes into play, how would that impede the political, the negotiations from the Pakistan side? We know that the military establishment over there is heavily involved, but the current government on the political side lacks credibility. Yes, this conflict is giving them credibility, they think, and moving things around. But nonetheless, there is wide support for PTI. And if they are going to get involved in any of those kinds of serious negotiations and other international actors involved, would they have the public support to be making those kinds? And how would they deal with it? I'll go to Dr. Hassan first and later others.
Thank you so much. I think this, rightly, as you have mentioned, this has a deep impact on Pakistan's internal domestic political scene. This has come up as a boom for the Pakistan's military establishment, which was facing severe criticism because of the handling of the whole Imran Khan affair, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is a very popular party, without a doubt. And Imran Khan being even incarcerated, he remains a very popular leader. I think the way Pakistan's military and armed forces have handled the situation, this has helped them tremendously. Although this was not the intention, they were not doing it to gain public sentiment. They were doing what they are trained to do and what they are paid to do and what they are meant for, defending their homeland. But this has resurrected them in a political sense as well. And this has direct impacts for the political players who are currently in coalition with them. For the lack of any other phrase, that's how best I can explain a hybrid institutional system at this time. So the current political arrangement in Pakistan has received, I think, a significant boost in terms of their credibility. And during the times of war and crisis, people become more nationalist and they forget about these things, and rightly so. And this provides another opportunity for Pakistan to focus on economy. And I think Pakistan must realize that they need everyone domestically to be on the same page. Look at Pakistan's geography. India is a lot of, it's a huge country with a lot of potential, with great international connectivity. Whatever its neighborhood thinks about itself, it has an economic capacity to manage many things that Pakistan cannot. And in terms of geography as well, look at the map. Pakistan is very vulnerable. So this is the time for Pakistan to think about ensuring that its constitutionalism is something which defines Pakistan's political arrangements, that Pakistan needs to be on the same page, whether ethnically, politically, or even in religious terms. Pakistan is facing a severe crisis from these, what we call Khawarij, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and other groups. Pakistan needs to fight those groups, and to fight from their point of view any outside threat. Pakistan needs to be united, and that can only happen if there is a political consensus as well. So Pakistan still needs political stability and a consensus and a social contract which is useful for everyone. But at the moment, the challenge that was faced by the Pakistani military establishment, which includes political parties which are currently running the show, that severe challenge that they were facing, that they have successfully tackled that as a byproduct of this crisis.
Thank you. Khalid Saab, do you want to say anything? And then we'll go to Dr. Qamar.
I will agree with the gentleman, our friend, that stability and consensus are the key to progress. Whatever differences there are there, but on the home front, there should be one front and one aim and goal: economic stability. I think that's one. Social stability. And these come only if there is political stability. And we hope and wish that this will happen to Pakistan.
Dr. Kamar, last word.
Yes, I would just build on what these esteemed colleagues are saying, that this is actually a moment after this crisis to really re-examine the political institutions, to examine the commitment to the Constitution, and examine how and where political parties can contribute to a new chapter in this in Pakistani's history, because it can't continue where certain parties are permitted and others are not. Some are suppressed. These just cause more disruptions for the progressive, moving forward society.
All right. I'll thank all three gentlemen for taking their time out from their busy schedule and joining us on this Washington Roundtable. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.